Hello. Today is our second Fund. So if you are just joining us for the first time today, Freedom Fund is a season where we have a matching grant, and True Organic Products has given us $25,000 to use as a challenge grant. So we are using this time for lots of things, and one of them is to let you know some of the conversations that happen during the year behind the scenes. And so we are super excited to welcome Justin from the Epik project here today. Hey, Justin, how's it going?
Hello.
Good. I
Good.
can hear you just fine. You
Can
hear
you
me
hear
okay?
me?
Okay,
Yes, I
awesome.
can.
Well, thanks for joining us. Are
You're
you in
welcome.
Portland
I'm
today
glad to
or
be
some
here.
other exotic place?
I am up in Vancouver, Washington. Exotic is not exactly how I would put it. But
Well,
it
I've
is
been
a great place
following
up here.
the Instagram for Epik and realizing that you guys have been super active lately. Been in DC and meeting with partners, and I think you were with Exodus Cry or something this week.
Yeah, Tom was down in LA doing a podcast with Benji from Exodus Cry, and he was in DC. Yeah,
Yeah,
it tends to go in spurts, and this week has been
yeah,
some busy stuff. It's
that's great.
been good.
Well, I was just kind of saying hello right before you hopped on, kind of reminding people what we're doing during this season, which for you, I don't even know if I explained this to you, but we have a matching grant right now. A local company, True Organic, has given us $25,000 to use as a challenge to encourage other people to donate right now as well. And so, yeah. So this is the
Oh,
ninth
great.
year that we've been able to do this. And we try during this time to not only try to get donations, which is obviously an important goal. We want to get the full 50,000. But also we try to use this as an opportunity to connect with donors and supporters about the work that is happening all the time that we just often don't have time to communicate about. And so we wanted you to come
Hmm.
so that we could sort of have the kinds of conversations that you and I and others have behind the scenes here in public.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
love
I
it.
would love for you to start by just telling people what the Epik Project is and who you are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And it's great. I
Likewise.
love talking with you, Krista. So this will be fun and easy, and I love the format of getting the word out. I don't have an Instagram, so I'm new to this whole world. So please let me
I
know
am
if there's a
very
thing
young
I
and
should
hip.
do
That is what
differently.
we like to take away here. That's what, yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
am the social media department.
I'm just gonna own that I'm not. Uh, uh, okay, so what is the Epic Project? So the Epic Project it's a nonprofit organization that started back in 2011 based on the vision that Tom Perez, the founder, had when he had learned about trafficking. But really, his vision was for engaging men. Just at that point, it was just get men engaged. Not sure what we'll do, not sure how, but just men need to be a part of this. And um, and since then, it has really grown into a place for men to meaningfully get engaged in the work of fighting the demand for sex trafficking um, in a way that is what we like to kind of call internally GSD. Like we want to just get stuff done. We want to feel like what can we actually do, and that's actually how some of our programmatic stuff started. Was we were men engaged, and we were spending a lot of time learning and asking questions, which in hindsight was a great start. But eventually, we just kind of had to like, I gotta do something. I'm
Yeah.
kind of going nuts here with all this information and all this harm that I'm learning about. And so we became an organization to not only engage men and inform men, but to equip and mobilize men to be actively engaged. Um, so when you say what is the Epic Project, it's a nonprofit. It's a movement. I think like it's part of a men's movement And it's a way for men to actively uh, engage in reducing the
Yeah.
demand for sex trafficking. I can explain more about what that means
No,
unless you plan to get into
yeah, I
the
would love for you to
specifics of
explain
it a little
because I
bit
think
later.
when you say equipping men to make a difference, the first image that people have is great, we're going to be the SWAT team, right? Give me my helmet and my
Yeah.
badge and let me go.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. To equip and
Yeah.
mobilize sounds
Yeah.
very militaristic. Um, yeah. And if I'm perfectly honest, Krista, like we probably started off not militaristic, but we definitely started off with an
Mm,
energy of being mad as hell, um, disgusted, and
mm.
I wanted to fight the problem on behalf of the girls that were being hurt. And we showed up with weapons and armor. Um, it doesn't
Oh, say,
mean that
wow. Okay. There's so
anymore.
much to unpack
Um,
right there. Yes. I think this is what, I mean, if I'm honest, I think most of us first enter the conversation mad as hell and wanting to do something. Um, but I get the sense that you have shifted.
yes, shifted is one way to describe it. I
Yeah.
think you could also say evolved, or I would say, and personally, this
Yeah.
is kind of my language, is we've grown.
Mm,
Um, we've grown, we've matured. Um, in that when you really step back and you say, well, I want to do something. Okay, well, why? What's your why? Do you want to do something because you're
mm,
mad and you want to deal with your feelings, or you want to do something because you want to be you're others
yeah.
focused, right? And so I think organizationally, what we know organizationally is just because of how we've grown personally in this movement. When you listen to story after story after story of survivors and the sort of trauma, not only the trauma that they've dealt with, but the grit
Mm,
to remain, um, or the intelligence, um, or the like street smarts, or what, like, all of the strength, endurance, whatever it is, and you start to get at the heart of the issue, you can't help but ask the question, well, what's the real
yeah.
issue going on with
Yeah.
buyers? And so if so what I tell guys all the time that show up with those weapons and that armors, if you really truly want to be helpful, the thing that you'll have to do first is
Mm,
take a breath and humble yourself, because there is not an easy solution that can be solved with weapons and armor. And and that's what we're taught as guys to do, right? Show up to the fight. There'll be a winner and a loser. There'll be a hero
yeah.
and a villain. So that's what we're taught. And it's not that easy. And it's not only that it's not that easy, that's not the actual
Yeah.
way to show up in this work. The way to show up for men
Mm,
in this work is to be curious, ask questions, get informed, and then engage when your heart and your mind and your posture are sort of properly grounded in what will
that's good.
actually move the
Yeah.
needle.
And it also, when you take that posture, you're forced to acknowledge that you're actually not the expert, that all of these other people that you're learning from are the experts. And you and I get to come to this movement and learn and offer what we have, but without feeling like we don't have lived experience. We can't know what it really
Right,
takes.
right. I don't have lived experience
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
survivor of trafficking for sure. I also
yeah,
don't have lived experience as a sex buyer, but I do have lived experience as a man growing up in a culture that's told me how to be, as well as how to treat women. And that gives me, so if I'm going to try to be a subject matter expert in some area,
yeah,
that's where I can be a subject matter expert. So what you're talking about is showing up as not being the experts. That's ground zero for showing up into this work. And it's understandable. People show up with either like a lot of like energy, or people show up with a big
Yeah.
programmatic solution. Um, and it's like, well, that's cart before the horse. Let's start with who. So I don't know the audience here, and maybe this will ruffle some feathers, but the church is a good example. Such a great opportunity for partnership there. Oftentimes
Mm.
shows up with all the answers, though, and not a lot of posture of asking questions to learn from the people who are experts to tell them
Yeah.
what's needed. So when guys can show up with curiosity and humility with what's needed, then we can start to get some stuff done. And when they show up with weapons and
Yeah.
armor, it's our job to say, I get it. I had weapons and armor. I actually still have them. What I always tell my guys is, you're allowed to have them. You just
That's
have to
good.
check them at the door. Come into the room,
Yeah.
do the work with humility, with empathy, and what we our four characteristics that we build our posture off of are humility,
Mm.
empathy,
Mm.
meekness, but a
Saying
stomach
that.
for justice,
Yeah.
because it's
Oh, yeah.
not easy work. So you can check your weapons and your shields at the door, come in with that posture, um,
Yeah.
and
That's
we can
great.
work
Okay,
from
so what
there.
does the work look like?
So the work looks like a few things. What we are most well known for is what we call cyber patrols, which is where we train men to talk to sex buyers at the point of purchase using the same technology that exploiters use to exploit. Um, and we've been doing that since October of 2013. And we have, which has generated um, over 250,000 purchase attempts from roughly 125,000 buyers across the country. We have teams of volunteers that we train to do this work in 20 cities across the country, and these are all men who have been through the process of what we just talked about, who are trying to engage buyers either via text message or phone call to have direct conversations in the moment of trying to purchase, to ask them why they're trying to do that.
Yeah.
And at the
Yeah.
same,
And yeah, no, I think
yeah,
that's the
right,
to ask them why. And and so
yeah,
for those who are watching and don't know this already, the Justice Coalition and Olive and Madeira have been partnering with Epik for over a year now to do these. Um, and that is the thing that I think maybe I underestimated the power of the asking why.
mm,
But I
mm.
think
Can you can you say
yeah,
more
because I think we
about that?
enter, I'll just speak for me. I entered with this idea that I would educate people. And, you know, I think education is powerful. And if we could connect with men who are buyers, that we could say, hey, do you really know? Then that would maybe cause the disruption. But you all
Yeah,
helped us understand the power of the underlying questions of not just don't do this, but why are you doing this? Because it's meeting a need. So what what's going on
yeah,
here? And yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One is um, the feedback that we get often when we tell people what we're doing is almost like, why are you taking such a soft approach? Right? So, so
yeah.
I'd love to hear about that, how you respond to that. And then the second would be I want to hear more about what you're learning when you ask that question, that why.
Okay, I'm
That's all
not
right.
really
I'll
good
try
at
to help
keeping more
you.
than one thing in my head
And
at a
we've got a
time, so you might
question
have
from
to
Andrew
remind
in
me
the
in the
chat
second
too, so
one.
I'll try to help come back to that. So, yeah,
Oh, great,
that's
great.
right. Yeah.
It's always good to know that there's people listening. Um, what was the first question
Why are you so
again?
soft?
Oh, I actually love this question. It's so asking why we're soft. It's sort of like saying, why do you forgive somebody that's hurt you? forgiving people is way harder to do than just staying mad at them, right? And I'm talking about maybe kind of like basic level stuff,
Yeah.
somebody you're in an ongoing relationship with. It's much harder to do the deeper work of figuring out what was really going on, why was I hurt, addressing that with that person. That's all really hard, deep level work. And it's a lot easier to just either brush it off or stay mad at a person. Um, so with buyers, we're not soft. We're actually quite direct and firm with them. And we do not believe that in order to invite them into a judgment-free space to tell their story so that they can connect to their why has to come at the expense of delivering the truths of
Yeah.
the harm that they cause. It is not a zero-sum game. It is not an either or. I can ask you, I can say, I'll even use sir. Sir, what led you to want to buy sex tonight? And they'll inevitably say, like, well, I can't get a date. I'm too old. Life's too complicated. My wife just left me, whatever it is. Notice that none of the responses in there was, I don't know, I was just feeling really
Right.
horny and wanted to get laid.
Yeah.
They're relational. The need that they're
Yeah.
trying to meet is not sexual, right? So inevitably they'll express some sort of a need that's relational in nature. And because they're expressing that, I can identify that. Wow, that sounds really lonely. One of our volunteers once said to a buyer, man, I don't know that
Mm.
specific pain, but I do know the pain of loneliness. And a connection was made. And that same volunteer is then able to say, can you imagine what it must be like to be the person that you're trying to purchase? Do you understand the trauma that they go through? Do you understand that? Well, you might have a buyer that says like, well, I treat them really well. I pay well. I tip. I'm not abusive in any way. Like, okay, how are you certain that nobody else is? And your participation in this is what's fueling the demand that's making them have to stay. That's enticing a trafficker to keep this person in supply to meet your demand. You don't know that every buyer treats them that way, and they're certainly probably not being treated that way by their trafficker. So you're participating in this. So just like with my own children, I don't either love my
Mm-hmm.
children or discipline my
Mm-hmm.
children. I do both. And going back to our earlier conversation, I actually want to make change in a reduction in demand. And we just know that shaming guys, telling them that they're doing something bad, that's not going to actually change anything. They're going to get off the call and they're going to call the next ad. Inviting them into a conversation might at least spark something in them. And I'll just say one more thing before we move on to Andrew's question. There's actually research that says that almost 60% of sex buyers would like to stop buying sex. And of those sex buyers who did walk away from sex buying opportunities, the number one reason that they gave was not because they got caught. It was because it no longer lined up with
Mm.
something internally. They had a moral conflict. So many of them want to stop, and many of them have stopped because they had a moral conflict.
Yeah.
I want to tap into that. I'm not doing this so that I can feel better about myself having shamed a guy or been the good guy. That's about me. I actually want to see a reduction in demand, and the only way we're going to do that is to get these guys connected to their
Yeah.
story.
60%.
60%. Yeah, of active and active high frequency buyers, it's like 59.8% of them agree or strongly agree with the statement, I want to stop buying sex. It's from the Demand
Yeah.
Abolition Who
Yeah.
Buys Sex report.
Yeah. I think what's really hard about this for some people is that it's almost like this, you have to get over this hump because being what you just said, being mad is easier. Empathizing is hard because it requires us to expose something about ourselves. I know what loneliness feels like,
Mm-hmm.
right? and then I have to be willing to
Mhm.
engage in that space. So it can be really challenging.
We're
Yeah.
really big believers in stories here at Epic. And one of my volunteers told me a story last year. He said, I went to my very first patrol, and my attitude was that these guys were scumbags,
Hmm.
and they needed to know that, and they needed to know that what they were doing is wrong so that they would stop. And he said, on my drive home from that very first patrol, I realized
Mm.
that these guys are just like me. In one night of some conversations with sex buyers, he realized that they're
Yeah.
not an other group, that they're guys who have taken whatever's going on in their lives, and they've decided that sex buying is their way that
Yeah.
they're going to try to get some need met.
Yeah.
Need met.
I want to go to Andrew's question, and then I want to come back so you can tell us a little bit more about what you've learned about buyers. Okay, so Andrew's question is,
Okay.
are you aware of resources coming from reformed men who were previously sex buyers?
Um, Resources coming from reformed men. Sadly, there are not a lot of resources like that. My guess is that those are going to be mostly local um, in nature.
Hmm.
So that's a great question, Andrew. I would love to look into that. I have read some research from reformed buyers that have said, and these are reformed buyers who have stayed reformed buyers for, I think it was at least 3 years, and it was a very small sample size, but it told a potent story, which is um, that the number one way that they identified that they were able to remain sober was having
Mm.
trusted companions on the journey with them. So, in terms of resources, there might be programmatic resources that people can tap into, and it's worth looking into. But I would say um, guys like
Yeah.
Andrew and I are also the resource, journeying with other men through their
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah, and
things.
I'm just thinking as you're talking too that like I know of resources for pornography addiction from men who were addicted to pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know of people, eh, openly saying that they struggled with purchasing sex. Um, and I mean, we could
Right.
have a whole nother conversation about how how different those two really are and how one fuels the other and all those kinds of things.
That's kind of where I was going. Like if
Yeah.
you're checking out Fight the New Drug, if you're a sex buyer and you're going to fight the new drug, it's not just helping you with your porn problem. It's also helping
Yeah.
with you with your sex buying problem because they have identified that the problem with pornography is the
Yeah.
same as
That's
the
right.
problem of sex
Yeah,
buying.
and Jay Stringer is another person that comes to mind with lots of good resources.
Mm-hmm.
If you're here
Yeah.
locally, there are a couple of regen programs that we could connect you to if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, good question, Andrew. Thank you for that. Okay, I would love to
Yeah.
hear
Thank you.
more about what you have learned over these years about buyers, the men that you're talking to. Who are they?
Well, it's kind of like the story that my volunteer told me. They're all of us guys. Um, they're me. When I teach at the local sex buyer class,
Hmm.
they look like me. They're just regular looking guys that look like um, office workers and doctors and pastors and construction workers and like every slice of the pie. So and arrest records tell us that buyers come from all demographic sectors. Research tells us that they come from all demographic sectors. There's nothing specifically peculiar about a sex buyer that makes them a sex buyer. So
So, okay.
they're
And
all
what's
of
the
us.
motivator?
Yeah. So I'd say that's one thing.
Okay.
Well, that was going to see the second thing that I've learned is motivation. As I mentioned before, the motivation is rarely about sex itself, the act of sex, and more about the dynamics of relationship. So the girlfriend experience is a common request that we get in our chats with buyers. And the girlfriend experiences way more than sex. It's a lot of time. It's joining them at a party. It's listening to their jokes. It's the putting on the facade of a relationship. Or people that maybe they don't want the girlfriend experience, but it's really clear they want you to play out some role that has to do with some kind of a relationship. Or it's really clear that they hate women. But even that is not about sex. It's about their relationship to women. Um, so I would say that what we've learned both from our experience and backed up by research is that sex buyers are overwhelmingly motivated by something relational. And um, you know, the idea that they just want to have sex is really misses the point that they're trying to satisfy some basic human need of belonging in some way, whatever that looks like for them, that
Yeah,
they're trying to satisfy that. They're just doing it in an extremely traumatic and destructive way
yeah,
for
right.
everybody that's
Everybody.
involved.
Yeah, that I mean, from our patrols, that is the
Yeah.
thing that we keep hearing too. It's this deep sense of loneliness. And the number of guys that have just said, I just wanted somebody to talk to. I'm new in this city. I drive a truck and I've been away from home for, months. I got divorced and I don't know who to talk to. I mean, they're just we have collected these stories, it feels like, that all center around loneliness. And I think I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
of the guy that you mentioned who came in angry and left with a deeper recognition. I do think it pretty quickly you hear the hurt and the wound in the hearts of
Mm-hmm.
these individuals, um, which isn't popular,
Yep,
Justin.
exactly.
People don't like for us to say that people who buy sex are people. um,
Mm-hmm.
it's much, yeah,
I've been there
yeah,
myself.
it's much easier to label them as monsters and pedophiles
Mm-hmm.
and creeps and whatever, right?
But this is where we go back to who are the subject matter experts? People with lived experience are the ones telling us frequently
Mm-hmm.
about who sex buyers are. And when I have a survivor of sex trafficking who has spent years um, interacting with buyers say to me that the majority of men are either ignorant or hurt, and that there's a small percentage of men who are just narcissistic, um, terrible people, but like really small. When I have a survivor telling me that, and that's backed up by lots of survivors that I've talked to, we have to pay attention that we can't let our vision of what we think this looks like dictate the choices that we make. We have to follow not only the experience, but the wisdom and leadership of survivors. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is, and that is, you're right. It's not popular. It's uncomfortable and it requires much more effort on our behalf. But if you are a guy and you are offended by the idea of somebody being bought and sold for sex and you really want to do something,
Mm-hmm.
then mean it. Get in the long game. Humble yourself and ask what is not don't ask what can I do. Ask what is
That's
needed
good.
of me.
What is needed of me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me what somebody who's watching this now or later or whatever, they're thinking, okay, so what is needed of me? What are the small things that people could do, or big things, I suppose, that individuals could be doing right now that would create lasting change?
I love this question. It's
Because
always
there's
really
just
hard
one
to
easy
answer.
answer that's yes.
Short. Well, I was asked this
Uh-huh.
question recently on the Buying Her panel about like if you get one thing, and it was asked by somebody who knew that I would have more than one thing to say, so they really limited me to one thing. Um, I would say get curious. I'm really tempted to say a lot of things about what men should do, but I would just say, get off the
Mm,
sideline and get curious, right? So if your way of being curious about trafficking is watching documentaries and absorbing information and reading papers, do that and sit with whatever came up for you when you got curious. If your way of getting curious is to make connections and go to meetings and meet people and ask a million questions, do that and sit in what you find out and remain curious. If you get curious and you start picking at this, you will find your lane. So don't let me tell you your lane. I'm just saying, get curious, and whatever lane you choose to show up in as a man in the anti-trafficking space, do it
I'm
humbly.
100% going to steal that and make a social media graphic. So I'm just, I mean, I suppose I should ask permission maybe, but
You know me,
that's
just out there
right.
setting social media trends.
That's so good. Get curious. Yeah, we always tell people to get educated, but I like that. That's even deeper. Educated. I mean, it's part of it, but um,
Well, if you think about, like, some people are led by their gut, some people are led by their heart, some people are led by their brain. And my whole thing is I'm a heart guy. So I lead with my heart. It breaks my heart when I see guys who get exposed to the reality of the pain that people go through in the world of trafficking and just sexual exploitation at a broad level. It breaks my heart when they're exposed to it and they look away. It's too
yeah,
disruptive to their lives. So they look away. It just breaks my heart because they wouldn't look away if it was somebody that they cared about. Either if they had um, if they had a son who
hmm
had an active pornography problem or a son who was an
mm,
active sex buyer, would they look away?
that's a good question.
So it just breaks my heart when people look
That's
away. So
good.
get curious and don't look away.
Okay, and then are there any systemic things that things that might make a long-term difference that we could be working towards? Simple. I like to ask the easy ones, Justin,
Yeah.
and we have 30 seconds. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, systemic things. It's so tempting to like have conversations about big like societal level
hmm
things here with the word systemic. Um, okay, here here's my best unprepared response to that, and it's similar to the get curious. Right now, masculinity is a hot topic in this country. And I would ask men, any guy listening to this, to remain open minded to the idea that what we've been taught to believe uh, as men, either about ourselves, about sexuality, about women, about our identities, that what we've been taught to believe, remain open minded to the idea that maybe there's been agenda there. Remain open minded to the idea that what we've been taught to be, how we've been taught to be as men, has not been created mutual flourishing for other people in our world. And whether like women, children, other men, just remain open to the idea that we've been taught to be a certain way as men, and it's not all bad, but perhaps some of it has not been. Perhaps some of it needs to be revisited, and I'm intentionally using a broad brush here, um, because we're talking about it systemically. But I just think that my number one hope in the world of ending the demand is to create healthy, whole, connected men. Not create. I don't create, but I don't create that. But I want to create opportunities for men to be healthy and whole. And healthy and whole men don't buy sex, but also healthy and whole men don't
Mm.
work too much to grow their bank accounts. They spend time with their families. Healthy and whole men don't like just swallow hard stuff going on with them over and over and over and over again because they feel like they're not supposed to be having those feelings or thoughts. And so they just die inside. Healthy and whole men express themselves. So this isn't about like tearing down masculinity. This is about, would you be willing as a man to remain open-minded to the idea that health and wholeness as men is better than the way we were taught to be
That's
in the
good.
world?
Very good. Thank you. Get curious and remain open. And for those wanting to be curious, please feel free to message us. We would love to get you connected. Epik has a new website that they have just rolled out with so many resources and information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a wonderful place to start. Our website as well has lots of info, and you can message us here on Instagram about how you could get involved in the work to stop and interrupt demand. So, Justin, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
Oh,
thank you,
that's kind of
Krista. You're
you.
so good at
I
this.
just talk. That's my job, and I got in trouble for it in school, and I'm making money for it now. So,
You call any of those old teachers?
all right. Thank you.
Thank you so
Likewise.
much. This
Have a
has been
great
really
day.
great.
Thank you. Keep up all the good work, and I will see you soon. Okay. Bye bye.
You too. Okay, bye, friend.